Hi, my name is Robert Boise, and I am proud to present this great CD release of Midwest Piano Sonatas. And if we will be introducing the project and the composers and the pianists that brought all this together. And if you have any questions or comments that you wish to ask the artist, please just go ahead and write in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. Meanwhile, I want to bring on Christine and Bryan. Hi, Christine, how are you? And Mike McFerron. Hey, Mike.
Hello.
Welcome, guys.
Yeah, great to see you.
It's great to see you. So, congratulations. I know this has been a project long in the making. It's always great when it finally put out the press, getting ready for sales, and all set to go, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why don't you first tell us when the release date is and where they can get the CD?
Well, I'm extremely excited that Navona Records decided to take on this project. And so it's going to be released next Saturday. No, next Friday, August 2nd. And it is going to be released in digital format on Apple Tunes or whatever they call it now, Pandora, Spotify, Naxos. So a lot of streaming services where you can purchase it. So
Great. And the link is below if you want to go and check it out.
absolutely.
So, Christine, tell us about this project. What's this all about?
So Midwest Piano Sonatas really started from a lot of driving that I've been doing around the Midwestern United States. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and I've been visiting my family an awful lot lately because of family health issues that have been happening over the last few years, and that's a lot of time spent in the car and a lot of time to think. And I thought about my connections to Kansas City. I now live in Omaha, where I teach at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And I thought about my American side. What does it mean to be Midwestern? I thought about the incredible people that I've met during my years of study and also working. And this project just sort of opened itself up in front of me, like the highway I was driving down in many ways. And so it really started with the Joanne Baker sonata, which I heard as a student at UMKC. I was a student of hers. Bryan and I both actually were. It was a sonata that I knew would be a wonderful piece to just include in my programs. But then I also thought of my husband. He had been writing a piano sonata recently. And then I immediately also thought of Mike McFerron, our dear friend who now teaches at Lewis University. And all three of these composers and I sort of converged at the University of Missouri Kansas City Conservatory of Music all at the same time. So it really was a crossroads in many ways. And UMKC is a wonderful university for compositional study, very active place. They're not afraid of new music in many ways. And I think that encouraged me as a young artist to not be afraid to take on new projects and new pieces and commissions, and certainly showcasing wonderful composers that I think need to be heard. And so that's really where this came from. It just kind of fell into place. Sonatas are one of my favorite genres to play. In fact, I find it very entertaining because my senior recital with Joanne Baker was three sonatas. One was by Beethoven, then there was one by Brahms, and then one by Barber. Strangely, all B names, but it's not what happened here. But somehow revisiting that idea of travel, the idea of adventure and storytelling, I think was a very important part of this as well. So the sonata genre seemed to fit as well.
Great. So the first piece, the Joanne Baker piece, that's
Mhm.
being presented on this album.
Yeah, this is a wonderful, very tight knit sonata in three movements. Joanne Baker was an incredibly recognized and very much sought out piano pedagogue. I mean, I met her when I was 5. I auditioned for her studio actually when I was 5, and she said, "I'm not taking children your age," but she certainly followed my career and successfully recruited me at age 5. I really wanted to study with her, so that she just had this incredible power and presence. She wrote the sonata in 1948. She had just finished her master's degree at the University of Michigan, and had studied with some notable people and incredible, I don't know, just incredible pianists and also composition. And so she decided to, or was encouraged to, submit this sonata for consideration in a composition competition through our music fraternity, Mu Phi Epsilon, and she won. So this sonata had a little bit of a journey where it was actually performed at Carnegie Hall. And additionally, there was an incredible pianist named Wilhelm Kempf, I think was the name. And just he was an unbelievable pianist who was really getting a lot of attention. And he was getting ready to play it, and he died in a plane crash. So the sonata had, a lot of difficulty getting some sort of energy behind it, except that many of her students have played this piece on a regular basis. She's taught it many times. And I just felt like this was a piece that needed to be heard because, many of her students absolutely love the piece.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we listen to a little bit of it? See, this is
Mhm.
a performance of yours in Omaha. Awesome.
Thanks so much. I remembered actually. I said it was Wilhelm Kempfen. I'm very sorry. It was actually William Capell, who was the person that this was sent to, and unfortunately could not perform. So
it would have been great.
Yeah, I mean, he was even consulting with Joanne about the piece and asking questions, and she was really excited about it, and then it didn't happen. So it was a very sad, unfortunate event.
And Mike.
Hello, hello.
We know each other for a while, but how about you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Well, first off, Rob, thanks for doing this. Thank you and Vox Novus for doing the album release. You keep calling this CD release. I'm not sure you can get a CD, so we have to. You know, us old guys have to start changing our vocabulary a little
Very
bit.
Very true.
But thank you so much for having us. I've been on several of your events, your live stream events, and thanks for hosting all of these things and for all you do for new music. And by the way, everybody out there in YouTube land, make sure you hit like so that Rob can get his 1,000 followers he needs. So yeah, I'm Mike McFerron. I teach at Lewis University, which is in the southwest suburbs of Chicago. I've taught here since 2000. And this has been really just a great project for me to be a part of. I'm just so honored to have my piece included. I thought I'd tell you a little bit of some background on this. So Bryan and I were very close, very good friends. We met in grad school. Bryan was my accompanist. I was all composers had to take an instrument, and I studied voice, and so he was my accompanist. And he was also, he was a piano performance major at that point in the master's program, but he was also a spectacular composer. And so we had a lot in common. We've also both liked to fish, and we have kind of the same sense of humor, which is kind of scary when you get to know both of us. But I remember, for example, like Bryan wrote an opera. I think was it the Cask of Amontillado? I think that was it. And I was, I loved singing that. And so Bryan and I's relationship goes really, 30 years or so probably back. And yeah, so when Kristín approached me to write a sonata, it was just such an honor. I didn't know Kristín very well at UMKC, but our paths crossed. And where we reconnected was just a few years ago. She did a performance in Chicago at Pianoforte, and my wife and I went, and we were just blown away. She did this great lecture recital on music from Iceland, which was something I knew nothing at all about. And it was just a really great evening. And that kind of, worked into a conversation about, hey, how can I get you to Lewis to play this program? And one thing led to another. COVID kind of got in the way. And then this project came up. And I was just so thrilled and honored to be asked. But although Bryan and I had been friends for years, the music that I was writing back then is significantly different than what I'm writing today. So I struggled a bit with the type of work that I would create for this project. When Kristín told me that it was about, by Midwest composers, and of course I knew Joanne Baker, and I didn't know she was a composer until this project. Her reputation as a piano teacher was incredible at UMKC in Kansas City. I mean, everybody knew her as one of the finest piano teachers that UMKC in that area had ever seen. And all of her students that came from all over to study with her. And so I was just thrilled to learn that she was also a composer. So I thought long and hard about what type of sonata to write, and um, it was such a freeing experience because there were no restrictions placed upon me. I wrote my first sonata in 2001, so over 20 years ago, at the MacDowell Colony. And I was there to write a piece for violin and computer. But again, there were no restrictions placed upon me, and I could write whatever I wanted. So I wrote a piano sonata. And then I didn't really write a lot of piano music for several years. At Lewis, we don't really have a piano studio per se. But about 8 years ago, we started working on becoming an all Steinway school and replacing our entire fleet of pianos to Steinway pianos. And working through that process, I started bringing in more pianists. We try to have at least one pianist every year on our touring series. And for the last 8 years, we've been, getting new pianos. And so because of that, I've been writing more piano music. And so the timing of this sonata was just fantastic. I'd written a big piano piece in 2017, about a 20-minute work that I was very proud of. And I'd written a bunch of little piano things around. And I would, every so often, I'd get something, I'd put it in the mail to Bryan, and I'd say, hey, if you and Kristín are looking to play something for 2 pianos and 8 hands, I've got your piece, right? So, so this really just sort of came around when I felt very comfortable of writing for the piano. The subject material for the piece, I struggled with a bit because, and I think when I met Kristín first to talk about, after I'd kind of drafted out most of it, I said, now listen, if you don't want to play this work, I get it. I just felt like I had to write it, but I'm also happy to go back and write something a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more whimsical. I could write hours of music on Kansas City barbecue, for example, if that's something you're interested in, or fly fishing, or things that I associate with the Midwest. But we decided to move forward with this. This just coincidentally coincided with the 10th anniversary of the Sandyhook shootings. And the Sandyhook shootings is something that had been had affected me quite deeply, as I'm sure it's affected many people over the years. But for me and my wife, it affected us because our son Henry was the same age as the children that were killed that day. And so throughout the last several years, when I would go pick him up at school or mark certain moments in his life, I always would come back and I would say, what are those parents going through today? And that affected me quite a bit. And just the story of how it unfolded and how, parents were told, and that whole experience is something that has moved me deeply. And around that time, there were other mass shootings, and around the time that I started to write the sonata, and there was something that stuck out, which was a social media post by Kristín where some senseless act had happened, and she just they've got a young son, and she just wrote something along the lines of hold your children tight tonight, and that affected me deeply because again it brought back that idea of what happened at Sandyhook. And so the piece is, I would say, it's not a political piece. This isn't a piece about, gun rights or, even gun control or anything like that. It's really, for me, it's about that human experience of being a parent and seeing a tragedy like this that is really unfathomable. And so that's why I wrote the piece. I felt like I had to write it for me, and it was just the right time and the right person to play the piece. And so that's how this piece came about. The work is in 3 movements. The first movement is called On the Playground, and that movement I thought a lot about going and picking my son up at elementary school the week after, around the time of Sandy Hook. And, as you walked up the hill to his elementary school, you could hear all the kids playing on the playground. And I wanted to try to capture that joy a little bit in that piece. The second piece is called Back Room of the Firehouse. And so after Sandy Hook, all the parents were ushered to the firehouse. And throughout the day, children would be reunited with their parents. And then as those parents and their children would go home, the parents left, were ushered kind of to the back of the firehouse. And then, I believe the governor came in and told them the awful news. And then finally, I think the last movement is titled Communion. And for me, it's a movement of hope that we can, heal together in community as opposed to, suffering alone. And so that's really what that movement's about. I will say this, this piece is written specifically for Kristín. The second movement, the entire musical material is taken from what's really considered by a lot of people to be the oldest known secular song from Nordic countries. I think it's written around 1300 or so. That's, sort of survived. And it talks about, having a dream of, fine silks and fine furs and all of those things that we hold dear to us. And so I thought that was kind of an appropriate musical material to lift for the second movement. And all of the notes in that movement come directly from that melody. So I've kind of gone on quite a while about this sonata. It has a lot of deep meaning for me, probably more so than just about any other piece I can think of that I've written. And again, it's just such an honor to be included on this CD, and I'm sorry, album. And I can't thank Kristín enough for inviting me to be a part of it. And I hope everybody gets the album and is moved by it, moved by all three of the sonatas that are here. I've seen this concert. Kristín's gone around and played this concert with these three sonatas, and it's just such a wonderfully crafted album concert where these pieces really work together in a really, really, I think, satisfying way. And so I hope everybody gets a chance to listen to the whole thing from beginning to end. And it's a great listening experience, is what I found.
It really is a great album of pieces. I think curation is a big deal. And pieces that sit next to each other need to have a good relation. With that said, why don't we listen to a little of Mike's piece? Beautiful piece, Mike. I love it.
Thank you much, and thank you, Christine. I'm sorry, you just play the heck out of it. It's great. It's not La Campanella, but I mean, it's not easy, and you really do. You play so well. Thank you.
I mean, I every time I play or hear this piece, it elicits a strong emotion because this is extremely difficult piece to play emotionally, probably the most emotional work I've ever played in my entire life. And what I think is really remarkable about it is wherever I've performed, I hear the audience sobbing. That particular performance, there was someone who was just, I'm surprised it didn't catch in the audio, but there was someone who was really just extremely sad from hearing the piece. So Mike has really caught the emotions of the day, and from the viewpoint of parents, we're all parents in this room, and our treasures that we have in our life are so important. And I think this piece is extremely timely. I don't think it could be more importantly timed than what Mike has done here.
Yeah,
And,
I agree.
Yeah.
And
the
if you want
colors are a striking piece too. Just listening to it, Mike's achievement in colors are just right out there.
Of which that was just a little sample. Please go out and buy the album. You'll hear much more. And if you want to hear more of Mike's music, you can go to www.bigcomposer.com. With that said, I think all the kids are also dropping the www. I've been schooled about that as well. Bryan,
Hello.
your cleanup.
Hey, I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt and tell an embarrassing story about Bryan? Actually, it's not going to be embarrassing. It's actually one of my fondest memories of Bryan and Joanne Baker. Do you mind if I tell this story, Bryan?
I don't know what it is, but go ahead.
Awesome. So we were living in Kansas City, and Bryan came over to my house. And Joanne Baker was out of town for some reason. I had gone out for the weekend. And Bryan, as a grad student, had been tasked with mowing her yard. You remember this?
Yes.
Yeah. So Bryan's also, the other thing that ties Bryan and I together is we were unfortunately Kansas City Royals fans at a time when the Kansas City Royals were just awful. And we'd go out to the baseball games because you could go really cheap and see the Royals lose. And but Bryan had decided that this weekend he would mow her yard like they do at the baseball field, where you mow it one direction at one height and then another direction at a lower height. And I think a lot of timing and planning had gone into mowing Joanne Baker's yard. And she had a beautiful house in a ritzy part of Kansas City, beautiful place, old place. And he got a phone call that she was not pleased with how her yard looked.
It was a lovely checkered pattern.
I'm sure it was great. But so Bryan had to go remow her yard so that it was all level. Yeah, that's one of my favorite memories that brings really me, Bryan. I was just, because I was kind of there, but that brings Joanne and Bryan and me kind of in the same universe.
It also says something about Bryan's sense of humor.
Yes.
It goes over most people's heads. But if you get it, it's astoundingly hilarious.
I thought it was one of the most creative things I'd ever thought. I mean, you didn't have a yard, right? You lived in an apartment. You didn't have a yard, so this was.
I had to find some way to vent my herbivorous nature.
Yeah.
But
sorry, I just had to. I wanted to interject that story when I was thinking about being on this album release party with you. I thought, what embarrassing thing can I say about Bryan?
Right. Well, one of one of my favorite memories about McFerron. We decided to do that early morning fishing trip up to Smithville Lake, and it was like 4 in the morning. And that's when I discovered that Coca-Cola does not taste good at 4 in the morning. But nevertheless, there we were in the truck, in McFerron's truck, and as we drove off, McFerron blasted some Puccini excerpts and sung at a full-throated volume at 4 in the morning. It was quite an effect. So in a way, you know, McFerron and I, our music is naturally different in styles, but I feel like that he and I have a common musical soul, and I can tap into that. I can relate to it, and for that reason, I'm really honored to share album space with him.
Excellent. Well, so Bryan, tell us a little bit about your half of the soul.
Well, like Mike, I had written my first piano sonata back around 1999, before the turn of the millennium. And it was getting to be around 2017, when I thought to myself, man, I am overdue to write another piano sonata, right? So I wanted to undo that drought. Now, around that time, in 2014, 2015, I had been living in Park City, Utah for a number of years. And that was a natural space that I found inspiring. And I'd also been doing a lot of piano teaching there at the time. And so this sonata kind of drew some inspiration from Park City. In fact, I had dedicated the piece to a former piano student of mine. She was an adult student, Paula Monroe. And her story is neat in that she had studied piano as a kid and then had kind of put it away for many years, several decades. And she wanted to bring it back up, and she sought me out and she took lessons from me. And I could just see her confidence and her renewed love for piano come to full blossom. And for those reasons, I thought, I'm going to dedicate this sonata to her. Now, the thing of it is, I'm a thoroughly Midwestern boy. I was raised in Atlantic, Iowa, and like Christine and Mike, I went to University of Missouri in Kansas City. And Christine and I, we knew each other.
Oh no.
Back when we were both in the same studio under Joanne Baker. But we just kind of looked at each other with sort of dry observation. And Christine knew that it was probably a good idea to keep her distance from me at the time. But somehow 18 years later, we reconnected online. This was like in May of 2014. Well, we got married then in June of 2015. So that's how that went down. And before I knew it, I was moving back to Iowa, to my Midwestern roots, after being in Salt Lake so long. And it was around that transition when I started working on this second piano sonata. So in a way, the piano sonata is, on one hand, inspired by my Park City experiences, but also a homecoming back to the Midwest. So, it kind of fits the album nicely in that respect. It's a 3-movement work, and I kind of made a conscientious effort to have this be sort of a lighter piece, a happy piece, with clearly delineated lines of lyricism and melody and things like that. The forms of the movements are fairly traditional. The first movement, I try to keep compact, a nice compact sonata allegro form, as it were, which is a very traditional choice in your classical and romantic piano sonatas. And then my second movement is more of a, kind of a rondo-esque, atmospheric piece. that tries to capture certain moods. And then the last movement is a set of variations. And I wanted to make sure I got that done. I really wanted to write a set of variations because I hadn't done that before. And I felt like that was an important tool to have in my composer's toolbox. And so there are those three movements to the piano sonata.
And there's cyclical elements too, because little bits and pieces of the sonata prior to where it shows up again, you know, there's cyclical moments between movements even, and so it's not just a nice piece to listen to, but I mean, there's something to really study within it.
Right. The main theme of the first movement makes sort of makes an appearance at the very end of the second movement, as if it's, you know, uncovering something. And then in the third movement, it becomes part of the triumphant conclusion to the set of variations, because in the last variation, it is interwoven in the fugal episode as the piece concludes. So.
And dang hard to play, let me tell you. I mean, both Mike and Brian's pieces, they're difficult to execute for different reasons. Brian just has a certain way of doing things where you expect you to go this way and he goes and takes an interesting tangent, which is very much like him too. But it's, you know, as a pianist, it's been an incredible journey to learn these three pieces that all have their intricacies and differences and unique idiomatic things that are so different between each of the composers, and the difficulties, technical difficulties between each of them.
You know, I've heard this piece now several times. I just want to say one thing. I don't know what excerpt you're going to play, Rob, but every time I hear it, this is why this is such a great sonata, and it's also a great sonata to end the album with, and also the concert with, is that Brian is a real master in this piece of setting up an expectation for the audience, but then exceeding it, right? And it kind of related to what Kristín said about maybe from the perspective of the pianist, but that also exists for the audience member. And so as you're listening to this piece, for example, in this last movement, I'm always thinking, okay, he's got to be done now. He can't take us any further. He can't go any further. And then he takes us one more step, and then one more step. And it's music for me that keeps me on the edge of my seat. It's music that has a really wonderful shape throughout. It's dramatic, and like I said, he sets up an expectation, and instead of just delivering what he tells you he's going to, he exceeds it. And so for me, that's what I really get out of this sonata. I find the last movement in particular just extraordinarily exciting and rewarding. But again, I don't know what you're going to play, Rob. So maybe don't play the last movement.
That's right.
If
you want to hear the last movement, buy the album.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, let's hear a little taste of that. Very good. Yeah, Mike, I agree wholeheartedly. It's you definitely exceed expectations. It's awesome. That's great. And if anybody wants to find more about Bryan, you can visit him at his website as well. Um, Christine, you're also you've also published uh, Joanne's work, correct?
Absolutely. I started my own publishing company some years ago when it was after my second Fulbright research that I'd been doing. And the composer I'd been researching, most of his music was still handwritten. And I felt there was a need to get this music published. And that is definitely an ongoing project I'm still doing. But I felt like Joanne Baker's sonata needed also to be in an edition that wasn't just a handwritten edition, which was, I managed to get the one copy from a library in Ohio that had been donated to the library from someone she had assigned, copy, fantastic pianist who lived in the Cleveland area. And so my husband and I worked together to do this. We made a very nice edition of the piece, which I think has undergone so many. There it is, so many wonderful, you know, lots and lots of very very careful eyes over all of it. Um, Her daughter, Wyatt Townley, provided a beautiful poem. She is actually a poet laureate of Kansas, and so she wrote a poem about her mother, which is in the edition. And the cover art is actually by Joanne Baker's granddaughter. She made this beautiful drawing of the tree coming out of a musical sort of earth, which I think is quite beautiful. My website is called Homo Ludens Publishing. Homo Ludens means the play of man. It is a philosophical thought by a Dutch composer, or Dutch philosopher named Huizinga, who believed that we learn so much from play. And so this, who plays more than musicians? We do so much play. We think playfully. We're playful in our interactions with others. And so that's why I came up with this publishing company. And so the Baker Sonata is currently available and for sale, but I'm also going to be releasing Bryan's Sonata very, very soon. We're wrestling with a cover to the publication, and it should be available within the next few weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And also, there's the album cover.
Yeah, this was quite an amazing thing because the Midwest is so wide-reaching. I mean, again, we could have had a picture of Kansas City barbecue on the front. But we could have had a picture of the Missouri River or something like that. We wrestle with a lot of different things. But then in Nebraska, there's this incredible event that happens every year. There's cranes that come through essentially the Platte River Valley.
Sandhill cranes.
The Sandhill cranes. And it's an incredible event. And so we used a picture from that area and those beautiful cranes. And I thought it really worked because it's so many beautiful birds taking off. It could be likened to the children in Mike's sonata. I mean, in my mind, at the end, they're definitely going to heaven. So here are these birds rising out of the plains of the Midwestern United States. So lots of symbolism and meaning in this particular picture too. So I'm very pleased with our cover. It's been very beautiful.
Awesome. Great.
Hey, talking a little bit, Christine, about the recording of the album, where we recorded it and things like that.
Absolutely. So the whole recording was made at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, where I teach. And I am extremely pleased that I got to work with one of my colleagues in making this recording. His name is Wyndham Inaim. Just a moment. I'm going to get this right because, yes, and I'm absolutely
Yes. Okay, here we go. Inayemba. Wyndham Inayemba. He is an incredible recording engineer at UNO, and he did all the editing, all the mastering, all the work, and one of the absolute best recording engineers I've ever worked in my entire life. So his work is just very strongly featured in this entire album as well.
Yeah, just to kind of confirm, maybe this is apparent to everybody, but in case it's not. So the excerpts that you played, Rob, were from a live performance, and then the album is, then the album was recorded separately. So the recording that you get when you get the album from Navona is a different recording that Wyndham did, and it's spectacular. It's mastered well, it's edited well, and I mean the excerpts you played were great, but it's different. The recording is not from that.
So wait, Mike, it doesn't sound the same when you're on stage that it is in the studio?
Like I said, it might have been apparent to everybody but me, but I just thought I would bring it up anyway. Thanks, Rob.
And I should also note that this recording already has received awards for its work. It was submitted to the Global Music Awards, and it received a silver medal, both in new release as well as composer, and it was Mike's piece that we submitted. So we're already an award-winning album.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Great. Well, guys, thank you so much. If anybody out in the, the meta universe or whatever they call it these days wants to ask a question, feel free, yeah, they're fantastic pieces. I've heard them a couple of times myself, and it's really lovely. It's a great album. Christine, congratulations! It really is awesome.
Thank you so much.
I can't wait to have it in my archives.
I'm very proud of how it's turned out, and certainly the recording has been an incredible labor of love and all the work that we've been doing. So and I really want to thank both Mike and Bryan, and of course Joanne passed away a number of years ago. Otherwise I'd certainly be including her in this, although she would have absolutely refused, probably. Just she was so humble about her compositional skills. But
she might have come on after the comment about the lawn.
But in truth, who is a performer without the composer behind it? Because if they didn't compose anything, we'd have nothing to do. And ultimately, our job is just to interpret it and enjoy the amazingness of the work that we're playing.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Well, thank you again. This has been a pleasure and a joy. I don't know, does anybody else want to say anything else about their work, the album, or the experience, or anything?
Go get this album. You won't regret it. It's a really tight-knit album. Go get it.
And it's at Navona Records, catalog NV6653, easy to find, just Midwest Piano Sonatas. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Again, go buy the album. You won't regret it.
And thank you so much for hosting this program, Robert. We're very, very appreciative.
Oh.
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, truly my pleasure. Thank you.